How is everybody doing today? My name is Master Zero and welcome back to another reaction video. This time we're reacting to The Most Terrifying Monster We Can Imagine by Curious Archives. Alright, so I've been anticipating reacting to another Curious Archive video just because the ones I've done during Science Month were just a thing of beauty, man. Like, his narration along with, like, the topics and, like, everything that he pulls from, you know? He, like, kind of pulls everything from every fandom, at least the ones that I'm used to, you know? And, like, creates this, like, amazing story involved with all of them, man. It's just really, really amazing stuff, and I really hope that this is no different because, like, the most terrifying monster we can imagine, like, that could be literally anything. Like, going back from my childhood, you know, like, the monsters from Space Jam terrorizing Bugs Bunny to, like, the freaking, that one monster being from, I think it was Magnificent or something like that, the one with Mickey Mouse when he's a wizard, or like even like the Lynch, you know, like from Adventure Time. Like, all of those from my past have become like stapled into my brain, you know, for the good reason. Like, they are quite terrifying, and like growing up it kind of morphed into like the more like real monsters, you know, like the psychological terror and stuff like that, where it's just like a dude terrorizing someone, which is like scary enough because that's like when you have like realism to it. So I'm very excited to see what he's talking about. So without any further ado, here is the most terrifying monster we can imagine. Speak of the devil.
Oh.
Quite literally.
I must have been 5 or 6 when at a sleepover a friend asked me, "What's the scariest monster you can think of?"
It always
My mind
happens
raced
as
for the answer. Even back then I thought of myself as
the devil
creature expert, but nothing felt big enough, mean enough.
Sleepovers. I didn't say
scary
finish my
enough.
sentence.
Another friend turned to us and whispered, "Do you know what I think it is?" There is a shadow lurking
What is
across
it?
cultures, an eternal struggle to depict
I was
ultimate
joking.
evil.
Is he
How
gonna talk
can
about the
we,
devil?
with our limited means of comprehension and storytelling, portray true darkness, make fear physical?
Oh man, I missed
What is the
this.
base of the most terrifying monster we can fathom?
Well, color me intrigued already, man. I mean, I was before the video even started. The devil you know.
There are two fundamental problems we need to confront to determine the scariest monster. The problem of
Hey, you
evil
should have done this.
and the problem of fear. Both
Should have done this
abstract
during
concepts
Halloween
are
is what I was
widely
gonna say.
understood, but difficult to concretely visualize.
Oh, man.
Let's start with evil. Depicting a cruel
Okay.
action is simple enough, but imagining a physical embodiment of evil itself is deceptively challenging. For centuries, visual media has employed different methods to try and make
just
a
put
figure
horns on
feel
it.
like darkness incarnate, from early tricks of
Hey,
light and
Dracula.
shadow to modern VFX. The most common shorthand is to simply copy the appearance of
Tenacious
the
D.
guy. You know the one.
Of course, there are all manner
Satanus.
of lesser imps and demons, but the great Satan himself is red and scaly with a bifurcated tail. He carries a hay fork.
But
And
if
he usually
all
has
it
goat
took to
feet.
make a convincing epitome of evil was a red cape and pointy horns, Halloween would be a lot scarier. Just because a narrative tells you what you're looking at is the Lord of all malice doesn't necessarily
It's gotta
mean
like
you
drive
believe it.
home the
Creating
evilness,
a figure
man.
that viscerally personifies evil is not just a question
Can't
of
even think about
visuals, but
shadows.
characterization. After all, cruelty
Just
is
the
not an
unseen.
aesthetic so much as a behavior.
What the hell?
One
I
of
need
the
to
most
watch Gravity
important
Falls.
landmarks
Hey,
in
that's what I was
portraying
talking about.
Wickedness on screen comes from Night on Bald
Freaking
Mountain,
Mickey Mouse.
an unshackled vision of demonic terror whose central evil deity is not only a perfect foreboding silhouette, but a remarkably spiteful and sadistic creature.
Yeah, that went
using
hard
its
for Disney, man.
unfathomable power
They don't make
to
'em like they
create
used to.
life for the sole purpose of gleefully watching its creation struggle to cling to their pitiful existence.
Oh
the
my.
macabre circus of agony this
gonna say it again, man. He has a way with words.
Feels sprung to life from centuries of paintings of the demonic inferno. The Demon of Bald Mountain could be considered a benchmark of evil in both characterization
That's very
and
true.
appearance, its twisted psyche looming just as large as its physical form. But notice
And he
I
has,
said
like, little to no
could be
color.
considered.
It could
See,
be.
It's difficult to empirically measure evil beyond
Hey.
subjective feeling.
Didn't know Lilo
Most
and Stitch would get
philosophies
involved. Or
recognize two major
Where's New
categories
Groove?
of unkindness: moral evil, which is the result of intentional actions, and natural evil, which is the result of impersonal phenomena. And notably, most people
just
find
evil
the
for the
former
sake
to
of
be
it.
more evil than the latter, regardless of scale. Norman Bates from Psycho can't
That's a
level
great
city like
example.
Godzilla,
Godzilla.
but he nonetheless feels crueler because of the conscious
Yeah.
thought behind his misdeeds.
I'll show the
Whether
skull.
This is objectively true.
It's like my
could be the
favorite shot.
subject of boundless philosophical debate, but for the purpose of this video, let's just roll with it and define evil as
these old
bad
cartoons,
intentions
man.
multiplied by cruel actions.
That's
So
fair,
now
in all
we
honesty.
seemingly
Oblivion?
have the formula for determining the ultimate monster.
cannot
Find
believe
the entity
Tenacious
that's
D was
done
under
the
this.
worst things for the
One of my
meanest
favorite
reasons,
movies.
and we've got the winner, right? Well, not so fast, because we've forgotten the second half of our
Knew that was
quandary,
coming.
the question of... And just because
Why do
something
you
is
do
more
that to me?
unethical doesn't inherently mean we'll be more frightened of it. Consider the two dark gods from Adventure Time, Hudson
Hey.
Abadir and the Lich.
The
Hudson
Lich,
rules over
man,
a plane
hands
of
down.
Eternal agony, a sadistic layer cake of nightmares seemingly designed to torment an infinite
Cannot
amount of
believe
people
all these
for
came
an
from, like,
infinite
children's
amount of time.
cartoons.
It is
Not just
Hades
Adventure
and
Time.
Hell and like the DMV all rolled into one.
That is fair, man. The DMV is torturous.
Considering that Hudson has set the realm up this way because he thinks it's funny, from a philosophical standpoint, he's
And Marceline's
just about
dad.
the peak of moral evil. In contrast, the Lich's plan to extinguish all life is
Dude,
cold
there's
and
something about the
dispassionate.
Lynch, man. The
Obviously
design,
not
the
a
way
nice
he
thing to do,
acts.
but his motivations are likened to that of an unfeeling machine. Next to Hudson, he
That's
is not
very
as
true.
traditionally immoral. And yet, as anyone who has seen this series can tell you, the Lich is far scarier.
Yes,
There is only darkness for
100%.
you, and only death for your people.
Fear is more than an equation. It is a primal, irrational
Oh, love
instinct.
that.
Were we beings of perfect logic, then perhaps the more ethically corrupt something was, the more we'd quake in our boots. But that's not how our brains work. Hudson's domain of fiery suffering might be
didn't
less
think about Hudson.
principled than the
When you have the
Lich's icy
Lynch, he's way
oblivion,
worse,
but it
my
isn't as
opinion.
frightening. That we might find a frigid, calculating evil more
Colder
menacing than a
Inferno.
firestorm of cruelty is not a recent psychological phenomenon. In Dante's Inferno, a 14th century narrative poem, the very
And a
heart
really
of
good video
hell
game.
is cold, a vast frozen realm robbed of passion and light, its agony slow and carefully measured.
Oh my
You see
God.
this idea echoed
Again,
in the
I need to
book
watch Smiling
series,
Prince.
A Song of Ice and Fire, where the most terrifying threat to the realm aren't the fires of human conflict, but the icy machinations of the enigmatic others.
a really
beings
good way
whose
to put
rotting
it, man.
fingers are steadily creeping across the world's
And they look
throat.
Zombinoid.
In the adaptation Game of Thrones, the others are ruled by a demonic
God,
Night
Game of
King,
Thrones used to
a
be so
figure
cool.
who, after
The
8
last season
seasons
ruined
of
it.
ominous buildup and compounding mysteries, was revealed to be a stupid and uncalculating bad guy.
Yeah.
Some would argue this was a terrible decision, by which I mean me. I'm arguing
Yeah,
it was terrible.
a lot
but
of
before
people.
the curtain lifted to reveal a generic villain,
the
there was
unknowingness
something
is what
gripping
really
about the Night King's
matters, in
glacial
my opinion, man.
maneuverings. A terrifying sense of an intelligence colder and more callous than any human consciousness. Monstrous evil
Hey!
envisioned not as a raging
Thor
brute, but a
Ragnarok.
subtle intellect has, to me,
I hate that.
always been
Is that
the more
actually you, by the
disturbing
way?
interpretation.
I wanted
The
to
Witcher
comment about
series
that
pushes
earlier.
this concept to the extreme with Gaunter O'Dim, a nightmarish figure who, despite possessing near infinite power, at first seems unassuming and even forgettable in this world of titanic dragons and giants.
I only played a little bit of The
O'Dim
Witcher
is an
3.
egoless and patient malice, content to make the world his plaything through the smallest contracts and adjustments.
Huh.
He may very well be the devil of this
Oh my
realm.
God.
After all, Old Pointy Horns is often shown working through manipulative deals and temptations. The strange
Again, man,
of the
putting
game
Emperor's New
Red
Groove
Dead
in this.
Redemption operates under similar principles.
Oh,
He's a
yeah!
seemingly all-knowing taker of souls.
He
who
just likes to mess with
nonetheless
ya.
describes himself as an accountant, completing his grim tasks
The worst
with
of them
the
all.
utmost calm, as is the case in The Witcher. Whether the strange man is the
Parallels do
devil
be
itself
there.
or some other being is wisely left up to interpretation. Unlike the Night King, these
It's like, was
entities
he the devil?
retain their unknowable
Kinda like in the second one when you see the
gravitas, never
vampire.
lifting
That's
the
a little more
veil upon their
on
true
brand.
nature.
What are you?
Do you really wish to know?
Kinda.
Yes.
No, Geralt. You don't.
Despite
okay.
only ever revealing a small glimpse of their power, both figures feel hopelessly beyond the scope of the player's influence. Forces that can be neither slain, halted, nor understood.
Damn you! Yes, many have.
That the most menacing
That's a
monster
perfect
may well
response
be
to
a
that, man.
secretive, subtle figure might seem counterintuitive.
Nosferatu.
Surely the greater the scale of an on-screen horror, the greater the impact. Yet as I've discussed in
not
past
necessarily.
videos, beyond a certain threshold of destruction, it is increasingly difficult to take devastation seriously. A villain blowing up the universe is generally less scary than a villain blowing up a building, because our minds can
That
much
is true.
more easily quantify the latter.
Yeah, the
Out of every
realism,
villain
man.
in the
Add
Avatar
realism to it.
series, the least menacing is probably Vatu from The Legend of Korra,
Oh,
even though he's
I
an
need to watch that.
all-powerful embodiment
I did watch
of
Avatar.
darkness. Though the stakes have theoretically never been higher, there is something about this dark spirit that is impossible to take
love the
seriously.
design.
And it's not just the fact that he looks like an evil kite.
I was about to say, it kinda looks like a
Whatever
kite.
threat is so massive it's difficult to mentally encompass, it ironically makes the stakes seem smaller. Villainy on a cosmic scale, perhaps unsurprisingly,
Fantastic
struggles
Four,
to be
Rise of the Silver
infinitely
Surfer.
scary. So perhaps the most terrifying monster would be a hushed whisper of cruelty.
That's
An
what I was talking
evil
about at the
so
beginning, man.
understated that it sinks into your bones.
Add the
before you
unknowing
feel
and
the first
realism to it, man. There's something
Such
like
a nightmare
gets you.
stalks the bleak landscapes of the Polish film Diabel, a man cloaked in black known simply as the Stranger, who urges the lead character to indulge in his darkest impulses. What makes this depiction
That's
of evil
bad
unforgivable
advice.
is how the Stranger seems almost feeble throughout most of the narrative, showing fear
Be a
and
trick.
weakness like any mortal human would. Despite the fact
haven't
that
seen
he
that movie.
reveals his true cold
Isn't it just
malice
someone
in
stealing
the
bread?
first scene, despite the fact that the film's title literally translates to the devil, the Stranger is such an unassuming and delicate instrument of darkness, you find yourself second-guessing your first instinct to his true identity.
Could it be?
But with a
hated
hypothetical
that.
as extreme
She was the worst
as
of them
the
all.
scariest monster, one understandably might want a
God,
portrayal
what is that
is
movie,
both
Man Without a
subtle
Face?
and almighty.
Gotta remember that.
Equal parts personal and gargantuan. At a glance, the principal antagonist of the manga Full Metal Alchemist certainly
Hey.
has the gargantuan side down,
Yeah.
considering his plan is to, spoiler alert, eat God and become a new kind of divine patriarch.
Yeah, you know, typical
Father,
Monday.
and that's his official name, not Thou Father, simply
Just
Father.
Father.
Is exactly the kind of villain that on paper sounds
Full Metal
too
Alchemist
big
went
to
so
instill
hard.
proper stakes. And yet, as the name suggests, Father simultaneously embodies one of the most familiar and disquieting terrors, that of a cruel parent. Father was once a more childlike being who violently rebelled against his creators when they sought to control him. A twisted relationship Father continues with his own children, whom he regards as little more than disposable material, perpetuating a cycle of divine misery recognizable to anyone
I was about to
familiar
say,
with
where's Kratos
classical
when you need him?
mythology. The idea of intergenerational violence across pantheons holds particular relevance for devilish
That's very
figures,
true.
who tend to be once angelic beings cast down due to conflict with their creators. Father echoes such narrative traditions not just in his conflict with his makers and children, but in his disturbing resemblance to the actual biological father of the main characters, a figure who abandoned them at a young age. To the protagonist,
So
Father
sad,
therefore
man. That
represents
entire
a threat
series.
both impossibly
And it
cosmic and
escalates.
uncomfortably personal, a paradoxical nightmare that successfully embodies opposing extremes of monsterhood. The horrors of
God, his
familial
narration, man, it's to
dysfunction
die
are an
for.
effective method for grounding a larger terror in more intimate dread.
Yeah, we got Elden
In
Ring
many
again.
respects, all the gruesome deities in the realms of Elden Ring are the product of a broken family unit, each pantheon member wronged by at least one other in some sickening manner, and made all the more terrifying for it.
Yeah,
Elden Ring
and turned
features
into
such a
freaking monstrous
malicious
beings.
cosmology that it's at first
Just
difficult to
decay and
identify
death.
which figure is the zenith of cruelty. Promising candidates
Right,
include
they're all
the
bad.
god-devouring serpent of blasphemy, Moog the Lord of Blood, the
Don't
and
do
other
that.
insanely named fellows. But it is the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC that offers the most obvious
I have not
candidate
played
for a
that.
demonic frontrunner in the borderline Luciferian Mesmer the Impaler, a violent
Love the name.
god-child whose name is unfortunately quite apt. Mesmer seems this
I like
world's
the name.
Prince of Darkness, complete with an unsubtle serpent motif, and yet he too is ultimately a victim of divine parental mistreatment. It's implied that Mesmer is but a
don't judge a
tool
book
for
by
his
its cover.
creator deity, a tool discarded to rust after outliving his usefulness. For
Okie
Mesmer,
dokie.
like all his broken siblings, is rotting.
God,
the
dude.
entire household
Everything
slowly
about that game is
giving
beautiful to
away,
look at.
succumbing to a cold
In the worst of ways.
deterioration which even the mightiest evil figures seem weak in the face of. That the apex of darkness might be in any way vulnerable
Yeah, when a
to the
god
whims
cowers
of
in
a
fear.
parent or the slow decay of time may seem like a novel concept, but classical mythologies have long held that there are forces more frightening than any manifestation of evil. In Greek mythology,
That's true.
the ultimate monster is arguably Typhon, the father of all foul creatures, and yet his story ends with him taken by the frigid hands of the underworld, trapped beyond the veil.
There's
for
always a
all
bigger
eternity.
fish, man.
A similar
Ergo,
fate
there's always a
befalls
scarier
Kronos,
monster.
greatest of the Titans and OG terrible godly parent,
Yeah.
and yet his time in
God,
the
that
sun
painting.
eventually runs out. as it might for the
Some things stick
lowliest
to your
mortal.
brain.
Even the strongest evil may cower when faced with an ending. The Lich of Adventure Time, one of the first monsters
Yeah.
I remember shivering at the sight of, seems
Same,
to
man.
tremble himself when faced with the true finality of death.
It's like, I've
In a
done everything
universe
you
where he
want. It's like, what
succeeds
more
in
do you want from me?
annihilating all living things,
And he just
the Lich
dies.
is left broken and despondent, almost frightened by the meaninglessness of the oblivion that awaits
So
us
is
all.
Betty the true
I strove
evil?
to be your vassal on the physical plane.
Yeah, that's all I was
to
talking about.
extinguish all life, and in my universe, this I achieved. But it gave me no satisfaction.
Every monster discussed so far could be considered an agent of the same force. They are all bringers of death, dispensers
Every
of
single thing
endings,
you picked
but
to
they
talk
aren't
about,
death
man.
itself.
It's so
Death,
crazy.
with a capital D, shall we say, is a concept that's been personified numerous ways across cultures.
See, not the actual figure
sometimes
of
as
death,
merely a messenger or
but death
middleman.
itself. Hey,
There's another
Adventures a
way
Billion
of
Man, dude.
imagining death that's more chilling than perhaps any conventional ultimate
That is
monstrosity.
very true, man.
Jag är döden.
Okay, short, sweet, to the point.
Jag har redan länge gått vid din sida.
Ingmar Bergman's 1957
God, dude.
masterpiece The Seventh Seal tells the story of a knight who returns
So many
home
great
from the
concepts
Crusades to find his
just
home
hidden.
overwhelmed with the bubonic plague, and at the crossroads of war and illness, death itself
The imagery,
waits for him.
dude.
Seeking to delay his fate, the knight challenges death to a chess match, all the while begging the figure to answer questions about the nature of life, evil, and bereavement. Yet death offers no comfort. Its uncaring
Why
void
would it,
swallowing
man?
all cries for meaning screamed into the dark. Death in the Seventh Seal does not even seem to be a deity in the traditional sense, just a rule of the universe, a steady hand that closes the book.
I think that's what makes
on
it
every
terrifying, dude. It'll come for us all.
Ingen människa kan leva med döden för ögonen.
Perhaps it's unsurprising that death has been imagined as the ultimate villain. After all,
Okay,
fear of
man.
death is likely the most
I should have guessed it would be
fundamental fear we
death.
possess. Our abject horror towards cessation
I guess in
has
my
led us
mind
to
it's not-
monsterify
doesn't have a
numerous
body,
figures
so it's not a
associated with the
monster.
concept. Most adaptations of Greek myth make
80s.
Hades out to be a bad guy closely aligned with demonic imagery.
Not the
despite
Disney one.
fact that
I love
original
him in the
recipe
Disney movie.
Hades was a pretty alright dude compared to his siblings.
Yeah, in the real
and
one, I guess.
Also wasn't even the god of death. But it's hard to imagine a keeper of fallen souls to be anything other than evil, or at the very least, absolutely terrifying.
It's just a
The
job to
villain
them,
in
right?
Puss in Boots: The
Oh,
Last
that's a
Wish,
great
death
example.
is far more intimidating than you might expect from
Yeah,
a movie
it's
about
an
a
understatement,
talking cat,
man.
a lupine hunter that revels
Again, some
in
of
the
these,
terror
like,
of its prey.
things made for
This
children.
incarnation of death has a vengeful quality, gleefully overstepping the bounds of
He's
its
just toying with
station to
Puss in
reap
Boots the
lives it
entire
deems
time, man.
unworthy. That death might relish its task is a discomforting concept mirrored in the Seventh Seal, as despite its unknowable persona, that incarnation too seems to find grim amusement in playing with people's hopes for escape. In fact, while death in Puss in Boots at least somewhat follows a code of honor, death in the Seventh Seal is eager to cheat if it means winning the grand game against
That's not
evil.
good.
It is
Usually
the
in, like,
monster
every
at the
iteration
end
I've seen
all
of death,
things.
it's fair.
It has no reason to play fair.
Okay.
But death need not be an active villain to chill you to the bone. In Alan Hawley's brilliant animated short film,
How are we gonna get
Coda,
worse than death,
is a
man?
quiet, gentle figure that
Oh.
appears after a man's sudden passing. Unlike most personifications, they seek to comfort the confused soul,
Oh.
even walking with them through
That's a
their
nice
memories
breath of
is a
fresh
way
air.
of easing their passage. And yet death in Coda is no less existentially daunting, a force that cannot be outrun or dissuaded.
Are you going to kill me?
No. You're already dead.
Heard that
Whether
line
death
many
comes in
times. Not in real
gentle
life.
or with
It's just in
tremendous force,
pop culture
it is
stuff
the
I've watched.
great unifying certainty, the end credits for all who walk the earth.
Oh.
What monster could hold a candle to such
Kind of reminded me of
perfect
Mother
darkness?
Nature or something.
The difficulty with making
The devil
assertions
you
about
don't.
the most terrifying monster we can fathom is that it's almost impossible to escape the pattern of, yeah, but... yeah, the Prince of the Underworld might be the obvious winner of the scariest guy competition, but are they really as
But-
unsettling as an intimate malice? Yeah, an intimate malice might more easily get under your skin, but is it as existentially powerful as death itself? Yeah, Death from the Seventh Seal.
Like I said at the beginning, man, there's always a bigger fish.
But doesn't he also kind of look like he's got a sock on his head? For any monster you might envision,
I wouldn't care what they look like, man. It's the
always
actions that
counter with
scare
what they
me.
consider scarier. I feel like the Legend of Zelda series has been stuck in this pattern for a while, entertainingly
How do we go
trying
back to Legend of Zelda?
introduce bigger and darker versions of the biggest, darkest evil. This escalation has actually followed an arc similar to the structure of this video, going from more classically devilish figures like Ganondorf and Demise, to the latest entry featuring a manifestation of silent entropy known as Null. Despite appearing in one of the lighter titles tonally, Null is among the most foreboding.
It just looks
entities in the
cartoonish.
series,
I'm sensing a pattern, man.
Void of death
The
and
things that are more
decay.
cartoonish are
But
like the
whether or not such a
scariest
force is
ones.
more menacing than the other dark gods of the series ultimately comes down to individual inclination. I personally
fair.
find a cosmic void to be scarier.
Oh, what was
than
that movie?
anything that might
I remember
slither
that.
out of it. But someone else may
All about
very
triangles and stuff. That was
reasonably find a
trippy.
more physical embodiment of evil to be the pinnacle of monstrosity. In many ways, defining ultimate evil is a question of whether or not a corporeal nightmare haunts you more than a dreamless abyss. And it's
Oh,
a
that was
question
dope.
I don't think has a universal answer. Fear
Did
is
he
a
win the chess
slippery,
match?
evolving thing.
I hate
So
that,
surely
man.
True darkness would have many facets.
I remember when I was little, I watched this
Surely
like
the most
claymation thing. It
terrifying
terrified
monster
me.
Could wear multiple
Might be the same thing.
faces.
Do I know you? I hope so. I seem to know you.
Reflecting on the apex of terror is a somewhat masochistic exercise, but I think there's a primal value in entertaining such monstrous extremes. Since our earliest days of sitting around a fire, we've told tales of what stalks in the night, familiarizing
That's
ourselves
true.
with the grimmest possible hypotheticals.
Kind of goes back to what I was talking
Every
about.
generation
It's like the
has reflected
unknowingness.
on the hyperbole
Your
of the
imagination does the
ultimate
work for
monster,
you.
and perhaps that's as it should be. For when one pushes the boundaries of comfortability, the shadows of the world can ironically seem a little less ominous. I didn't have an answer to my friend's question all those years ago.
Full
and
circle.
when my other friend whispered, "Do you know what I think it is?" I wasn't certain what he would say. But even back then, my mind went to images of demons and death, those familiar monsters
That is
have been
fair.
with us since the beginning.
How can it
My
not?
friend smiled and said, "Actually, the scariest monster is your butt." Ricky,
Oh
if
my
you're
God.
watching this, I think you're the worst.
Oh, I was expecting
So,
like
if
something
you're anything
philosophical
like
or
me,
something.
you've
Obviously,
tried
they
more
were
than once
kids.
to create your own ultimate monster.
I'm
World
sorry?
Anvil is the tool to
Going
help,
straight into an
not
ad?
just with creating monsters, but for everything to do with world building,
I'm
map
sorry?
making, writing, and
sounds
even
amazing.
plotting out entire RPG campaigns. If
Oh,
you
let's
are
go.
at all interested in crafting fictional settings,
Yeah?
there is no better software
all about
for
that,
making
man.
interactive timelines, organizing your settings lore, creating planetary
How come I've never heard
and
about this?
interplanetary maps.
I'm
If,
sorry?
Again, like me, the lands and creatures you create have long been scattered across a bunch of disorganized
I
paper.
love it.
World Anvil will make sure you never lose an idea again, with 25 amazing article templates to track flora and
Dude.
fauna, geography, family trees, subplots, and much
Yes,
more.
please.
All stored in a wiki-style database for you to conveniently refer back to whenever you need.
It's like a very condensed
genuinely
version
so
of the
cool. You can
Library of
even
Babel.
dynamically combine maps and timelines using the Chronicles tool to keep
Oh, I
track
love that.
of exactly where and when everything happened in your setting. World Anvil is not only for solo world building, however, it's also a full-fledged campaign manager, supporting the
Hey.
5th edition of D&D plus tons
I was about
of
to say,
other
this would be
gaming
a D&D's
systems.
best
Use my
friend.
link worldanvil.com/curiousarchive to start creating. Signing up for World Anvil is completely free, but for a limited
Oh.
time, you can use my code ARCHIVE to
51.
get 51% off any yearly subscription, giving you access to even more tools, templates,
Oh, that's
sharing
so
options,
cool,
and
man.
beyond. Whether you're juggling tons of setting ideas or eager to make your first ever
feel like
project,
this is his
World
best friend.
Anvil has
That's
just
what he's all
you need.
about.
Follow my link in the description to get started. It's also
It's
a
a
way
Lannister.
to really help support this channel. Thank you to World Anvil for sponsoring this video.
That's cool, man.
And as always, thanks for watching.
Thank you
If
for
enjoyed this
making, man.
entry, please
Again,
lend your
another
support by
banger.
liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification icon to stay up to date on all things curious.
Yes,
See
sir.
you in the next video.
I'll see you then, man. Oh my god. Every single time I watch one of his things, it's just beautiful beyond imagination. Alright, man, so like I said at the end, dude, like, his videos are just so amazing. Like, they're filled with passion, they're filled with, like, narration, obviously, and, like, they're filled with, like, just, like, the world-buildingness of it and everything. Like, I can't quite put it into words of why I love it so much, but it is, like, amazing, man. It is so cool, and every single time he somehow finds, like, different media that I've never seen before, or that I have seen but never finished, and, like, makes me, like, so curious to keep going. I mean, obviously, the name Curious Archive, that fits so perfectly, dude. And, like, everything that he was talking about in this video, like, I also thought about growing up and stuff like that. Even now, like, thinking about, like, the most terrifying monster to ever exist. Like, I didn't even think about death. Like, obviously, like, hello, that's, like, the big one. But, like, obviously, like, you think, like, demons and stuff like that, or how I was talking about in the intro, you know, like, you have, like, more of, like, the down-to-earth, like, the human evil, which is, like, to me, more so as I grow up, like, that really gets under my skin, man, because it's, like, you never know what type of person is you're looking at, you know? Like, they could totally be, like, evil just for the sake of being evil, like, for no rhyme or reason, and, like, to me, that terrifies me the most. But, like, obviously, like, going into it, the whole, like, yes and but thing that he was talking about, like, there's always a bigger fish there. Like, you could talk about, like, a demon, but, like, death is even more sudden, more, like, kind of chaotic, whatever it's called, you know? It's, like, for sure, like, everybody's gonna go through death. So, like, everyone, even, like, no matter how big you are, how scary or whatever, like, you will die eventually, and that's gonna frighten you, you know? So, like, in the way that, like, okay, well, you think of, like, the fear side of, like, what's the scariest monster, then, like, death by all means is the scariest one, because everybody fears death, essentially. And, like, if you say that you don't fear death, you at least fear being gone, you know? Like, all your loved ones and stuff, like, obviously, like, missing you. I couldn't think of the word, but, like, man, this video, like, trying not to get too off topic, but this video was beautiful. Like, I cannot get over his stuff. Like, like I said, man, his narration, everything involved with it, the things that he picks to talk about, like, the topics, everything, man, it coexists to, like, just a perfect video, like, to where I'm entertained, like, from start to freaking finish. And, like, they're almost, like, 30 minutes long, but, like, it does not feel that long at all when you're watching it. Like, it is just amazing, man. I cannot get enough of it. I'm gonna stop babbling, or my video is gonna go on for 30 minutes, but, like, this was fantastic, phenomenal, whatever word you want to say. I'm like, my brain is like mush, man, but like I always say, in the best of ways. Like, this captured my, like, imagination and everything involved, like, my way of thinking, like, all of that. So I really love it, I really do. So thank you everybody so much for watching. Leave a like down below, subscribe, ring the bell, become a member, you get videos a day early, and check out the merch. So with that said, I have been Master Zero, y'all guys have been fantastic, and I will see y'all in the next episode. Later, days.